singer, dance, all around talented person.
There's a married couple in music history who wrote the soundtrack to everyone's parents falling in love, produced Motown's most legendary duets, and performed hits that still pack dance floors today. Yet most people under 40 couldn't name them if their life depended on it. Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson weren't just husband and wife. They were the architects behind Ain't No Mountain High Enough, You're All I Need to Get By, and Solid as a Rock. They could write it, produce it, sing it, and perform it. Multi-Threat doesn't even begin to cover what they were. But here's the twisted part. The music industry treated them like ghosts. Berry Gordy signed them to Motown, let them create magic for everyone else, then buried their own albums when they tried to step into the spotlight. By the time the world finally recognized their genius as performers, one of them would be gone, and the story of how they got there is as heartbreaking as it is inspiring. If you love uncovering hidden legends like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to Legends Underrated, because we're about to give Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson the flowers they've been waiting decades to receive. Let's rewind to 1964. Nick Ashford is 23 years old and he's got nothing. Not metaphorically nothing, literally nothing. He left Willow Run, Michigan with $64 in his pocket, a dream to dance in New York City, and the kind of blind faith that either makes you a star or destroys you. Except New York didn't care about his dreams. The city chewed him up. Turns out being a good jazz dancer in Michigan doesn't mean much when you're competing against the best dancers on the planet. Gigs dried up, money evaporated, and one day, Nick Ashford found himself on a park bench with no apartment, no food, and no plan. He told himself if he could scrounge up a quarter a day, he could survive on 2 hot dogs. That was the math. 25 cents equals survival. That's how low it got. But hunger does something to a man. It strips away pride. So when someone told him about a church in Harlem giving out free meals, Nick swallowed whatever ego he had left and walked through the doors of White Rock Baptist Church. He wasn't there for salvation. He was there for a plate of food. But on one particular Sunday morning, Nick saw something that changed the entire trajectory of his life. Sitting at the piano was a 17-year-old girl with fingers that danced across the keys like she was born to do it. Her name was Valerie Simpson, and she was playing for the church choir with 2 other girls in a group called The Followers. Nick didn't know it yet, but that girl would become his wife, his creative soulmate, and the other half of one of the most underrated partnerships in music history. Now, Valerie wasn't just some church girl who could play a little piano. She was a prodigy, started playing by ear at 5 years old, never needed formal training, just had it in her blood. She grew up in the Bronx idolizing Nina Simone and Aretha Franklin, women who could sing and play simultaneously, women who commanded a room with nothing but their voice and 10 fingers. Valerie wanted that power, and she had it. Nick approached her after service and told her he wrote gospel songs. Turns out, the Followers needed a gospel songwriter. Funny how the universe works, right? A homeless dreamer walks into a church for a free meal and walks out with a writing partner who would help him craft some of the most iconic love songs ever recorded. They started collaborating immediately. Nick had a gift for lyrics. He could paint emotion with words in a way that felt achingly real. Valerie had the music. Her fingers found melodies and chord progressions that made those words soar. Together, they were magic. Nick joined the church choir and the Followers, and they started churning out gospel songs. But here's where it gets interesting. 2 guys showed up at White Rock Baptist Church one day looking for talent to perform at a new gospel club called the Sweet Chariot. Nick, Val, and the Followers agreed. They performed, they wrote, and they got good. So good that they caught the attention of Roulette Records, which, fun fact, was literally run by the mafia. Morris Levy, the label's boss, was infamous for stealing publishing and strong-arming artists, but apparently even mobsters appreciate a good gospel song. The Followers released an album called Meeting Hour under Roulette, but then someone approached Nick and Val with a question that would fracture everything. Could they write love songs instead of gospel? Nick and Valerie came from the church. Secular music felt like betrayal. They prayed on it. And then they said yes. That decision changed everything. They left the followers, formed a duo called Valerie and Nick, and started writing love songs that got them noticed. Their first batch of songs sold for $75. $75. Let that sink in. The same duo that would go on to create multi-platinum records got paid less than $100 for their first work, but they kept grinding. They linked up with Joe Armstead, one of the original Ikettes from Ike and Tina Turner's crew, who was writing under a pseudonym to avoid being tracked down by Ike. Together, the three of them became a songwriting machine. They wrote for artists on Scepter Records, Ronnie Milsap, Maxine Brown, Betty Everett, Chuck Jackson, and then came their first massive hit, Let's Go Stoned by Ray Charles. The song hit #1 on the R&B charts in 1966. And here's the dark irony. Ray Charles recorded that song right after getting out of rehab for heroin addiction, a song called Let's Go Stoned. You can't make this stuff up. Nick and Val also penned I Don't Need No Doctor for Ray and Chain of Fools for Aretha Franklin. They were on fire. But while Nick was locked in on music, Valerie started doing something else that made her a fortune: jingles. Valerie Simpson's voice sold Budweiser beer, Canada Dry ginger ale, and Almond Joy candy bars. You know that sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't jingle? That's her. She was making close to 6 figures doing commercial voiceovers, which in the 1960s was absurd money, but Nick wasn't happy. He told her she needed to make a choice, be his writing partner or keep chasing commercial money. It was harsh, but he needed her. He'd even gone off and written a song with Motown producer Frank Wilson just to prove a point. Valerie chose Nick, and thank God she did, because what happened next put them on the map in a way that would define an entire era of soul music. Stories like these are why I built Legends Underrated, so make sure to subscribe for more untold tales. Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records, was building an empire, and he needed songwriters who could create magic for his newest duo, Marvin Gaye and Tammi Terrell. Holland Dozier Holland, Motown's hit-making trio, told Berry to sign Nick and Val immediately, and he did. Now, Motown was a factory. You had to write fast, and you had to write good. Nick and Val could write 3 songs in 3 hours. They were that sharp. The first song they gave Marvin and Tammi was Ain't No Mountain High Enough. It hit number 19 on the pop charts, number 3 on R&B. But here's a crazy piece of trivia. Dusty Springfield heard the song first and wanted to record it. Nick and Val told her no. They knew it would be bigger at Motown. They were right. Your Precious Love came next. Number 5 pop, number 2 R&B, then Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, which hit number 1 on the R&B charts, and number 8 pop. And then came the song that still gets played at weddings, cookouts, and quiet nights when you just need to feel something real. You're All I Need to Get By. Number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Number 1 on the R&B chart for 5 weeks. That song is untouchable. But here's the heartbreak woven into that recording. Tammi Terrell had just come back from brain surgery to remove a tumor. That was the last song she performed before she died 2 years later in March 1970. Valerie later admitted she sang a lot of the parts in those sessions because Tammi was so sick, though Tammi did come in and lay down her vocals when she had the strength. And if you grew up in the 90s like me, you know You're All I Need from Method Man and Mary J. Blige's version, which went number 1 and won a Grammy. But we'll get to that betrayal later. Nick and Val also wrote Keep On Loving Me Honey and You Ain't Livin' Till You're Lovin' for Marvin and Tammy's album. Then they produced the duo's third and final album, Easy. Even though Marvin didn't want to do it, Tammi was too sick. Berry Gordy convinced him the money would help her family and cover her medical bills, so Marvin recorded. And Valerie sang Tammy's parts until Tammi could finish them herself. By 1969, Nick and Valerie had won 3 BMI awards for Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, and Your Precious Love. Valerie also made history by becoming the first female producer at Motown. Let that resonate. First female producer at one of the most powerful labels in music history. But they weren't done. Next, they went to work with Diana Ross, who had just left the Supremes and needed a debut solo album that would prove she didn't need the group. Nick and Val wrote almost the entire album. Reach Out and Touch, Somebody's Hand, became one of Diana's signature songs, hitting number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 and selling over 500,000 copies. But the real knockout punch was Diana's version of Ain't No Mountain High Enough, which became her first solo #1 hit on both the pop and R&B charts. It was nominated for a Grammy, and to this day, I still think Diana's version might be better than Marvin and Tammi's. That opening, Listen Baby, just hits different. Nick and Val also worked on Diana's second and third albums, Everything is Everything and Surrender. They wrote for Quincy Jones, Gladys Knight and the Pips, the Marvelettes, Martha Reeves, Smokey Robinson, everybody. They were Motown's secret weapons. But here's the problem. They were too secret. Fans who knew Nick and Val wrote all these hits started asking, when are y'all going to put out your own album? When do we get to hear you sing? So Nick and Val went to Berry Gordy and asked if he'd sign them as artists. He said yes. Valerie recorded 2 solo albums, Exposed and Valerie Simpson, and released a single called Silly Wasn't I. But when it came time to promote those albums, Berry did nothing. He didn't push them, didn't market them, didn't treat them like real artists. He still saw them as songwriters, and that was it. It was a betrayal that stung deep. After 7 years at Motown, Nick and Val's contracts were up and they left. They signed with Warner Brothers, who actually believed in them. They changed their name to Ashford Simpson, started their own publishing company called Hinkle Val Music, and finally got to be the stars they'd been writing for everyone else to become. In 1973, they released their debut album as a duo, Gimme Something Real. The following year, they dropped I Wanna Be Selfish, though Valerie admitted that album felt rushed because she was pregnant with their first child, and they were under label pressure. But the most important thing that happened in 1974 wasn't an album, it was a wedding. Nick and Valerie got married after 9 years of working together. And here's the thing most people don't know. For years, they treated each other like brother and sister. That was the dynamic. Nick had other girlfriends, Valerie dated other guys. But one day, they just realized they were in love with each other, and that was it. They also turned down a massive opportunity that same year. They were asked to write the music for the Broadway play The Wiz. They said no because they didn't think black people would want to see a black version of The Wizard of Oz. Wild, right? Anyway, they had their daughter Nicole in 1975, and Valerie sang background vocals on Paul Simon's #1 hit, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, alongside Patti Austin. Ashford Simpson kept releasing albums, Come As You Are in 1976, So Satisfied and Send It in 1977, both certified gold. Then in 1978, they released Is It Still Good to Ya, which hit #1 on the R&B album charts and went gold. The single, It Seems to Hang On, hit #2 on the Hot Soul Singles chart, and that title track, Is It Still Good to Ya? Man, that was a monster. Teddy Pendergrass remade it later and crushed it too. That same year, they wrote Chaka Khan's first solo single after she left Rufus, I'm Every Woman, #1 on the Hot Soul Singles chart. And years later, Whitney Houston remade it for the Bodyguard soundtrack and took it worldwide. They also collaborated with Quincy Jones and Chaka on Stuff Like That, which went #1 on the R&B chart and contributed to the Wiz movie soundtrack After All. In 1979, they released Stay Free, which went gold, and the single Found a Cure hit #1 on the Billboard disco chart. That song has a deeper meaning, though. Nick and Val used to go to Studio 54 for inspiration during the disco era, and at that time, HIV and AIDS were devastating that community. People living with AIDS took Found a Cure as an anthem, a testimony that love could heal, that love was the cure. That same year, they wrote and produced Diana Ross's album, The Boss, and the title track hit #1 on the dance charts. In 1980, they released A Musical Affair and performed at the Budweiser Superfest alongside the O'Jays, Rick James, Teddy Pendergrass, and Smokey Robinson. In 1981, they dropped a live album called Performance, and in 1982, they left Warner Brothers, signed with Capitol Records, and released Street Opera. But 1984, that was their year. That was when the world finally, truly saw them. They released the album Solid, which hit #1 on the R&B albums chart, #29 on the Billboard 200, and went gold. The single Solid hit #1 on the Hot Black Singles chart, #12 on the Billboard Hot 100, and #3 in the UK. That song was everywhere. We built this love and we built it from the ground up, and now it's solid, solid as a rock. If you've ever been to a black family cookout, you've heard that song. It's a permanent fixture in the culture. They were nominated for a Grammy for Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group, but lost to the Commodores' Night Shift, which had been written as a tribute to Marvin Gaye after he was killed by his father. But the most emotional moment of that era came on July 13th, 1985, at Live Aid in Philadelphia. Teddy Pendergrass, who had been paralyzed in a car accident, made his first live performance since the crash. And Nick and Val were the ones who brought him out on stage to sing Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand in front of 99,000 people in the crowd and 1.5 billion watching on TV. It was beautiful. It was devastating. If you haven't seen that video, go watch it on YouTube. You'll cry. In 1986, they released Real Love, which earned them another Grammy nomination. This time, they lost to Prince's Kiss. That album featured Stevie Wonder on harmonica for the song Nobody Walks in L.A. They also appeared on TV shows like The Equalizer and One Life to Live. They had their second daughter, Asia, in 1987. In 1989, they released Love or Physical and wrote Roberta Flack's Ooh 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 Look Out, Love Comes, which hit #1 on the dance charts. In 1990, Nick landed a role in New Jack City as Reverend Oates. Classic movie, classic character. In 1994, Vesta Williams and Aaron Hall performed Ashford and Simpson's hits as a tribute. Vesta's vocals that night were unreal. Rest in peace to her. But then came 1995, and with it, a Grammy win that felt like both a celebration and an insult. Method Man and Mary J. Blige's All I Need won the Grammy for Best Rap Performance by a Duo or Group. It was a remake of You're All I Need to Get By, and it was massive. But here's what hurt Nick and Val. The New York Times called it the biggest record of the summer, and never once mentioned that Ashford and Simpson wrote the original. Not once. In an interview, Nick admitted it stung. He said they benefited financially. Those publishing checks were fat, but it felt like erasure. The new generation was making hits off their work, and nobody was giving them credit. But hey, the money helped ease the pain. This twist shocked the world. And if you never want to miss stories like this, subscribe to Legends Underrated today. In 1996, Nick and Val started their own label, Hinkle and Silk Records, and released their final album together, Been Found, a musical poetry collaboration with Maya Angelou. They also opened a restaurant and live entertainment venue in New York called The Sugar Bar, which became a beloved spot for open mics and live performances. That same year, they received the Founders Award from ASCAP, the organization's highest honor. They became DJs for a classic soul radio station. In 1999, they got the Rhythm and Blues Foundation Pioneer Award. In 2002, they were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. And in 2009, at President Barack Obama's inauguration, they rewrote Solid as Barack and performed it in his honor. But on August 22nd, 2011, everything stopped. Nick Ashford died from throat cancer at 70 years old, just 4 days before Valerie's 65th birthday. He'd been diagnosed in March after his voice kept getting hoarse. His last treatment was in June. By August, he was gone. And here's what makes it so cruel. Nick had quit smoking 30 years earlier. He was a vegetarian. He was in great health, great shape. Cancer didn't care. After Nick passed, Valerie kept their legacy alive. In 2012, she released a solo album called Dinosaurs Are Coming Back Again. In 2019, they received the Grammy Trustees Award, one of the most prestigious honors in music given to individuals who made significant contributions to the recording industry beyond performance. In 2021, Valerie was inducted into the Women's Songwriters Hall of Fame alongside Roberta Flack, Naomi Judd, and Denise Williams. She still performs, but she admits it's brutal, singing Solid alone, singing Is It Still Good to Ya without Nick's voice answering hers. It tears her apart. She's not sure when she'll do another full concert, and how could she? They'd been side by side since she was 17, over 50 years together, 22 gold and platinum records, over 50 ASCAP awards, architects of Motown's greatest love songs, creators of anthems that define generations, and yet they still don't have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Why don't Ashford and Simpson get the flowers they deserve? Is it because they were too good at making other people shine? Is it because the industry saw them as songwriters first and artists second? Or is it because we, as a culture, forget to honor the architects while we celebrate the buildings? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, if you learned something new, if you finally understand the magic Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson gave to this world, hit that like button, share this with someone who loves real music, and subscribe to Legends Underrated so we can keep telling the stories that history tried to bury. Rest in peace, Nick Ashford. You were a pioneer, you were a legend, and you were solid as a rock.